to crack on now?
Yeah, I think so. I think we should start.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Well, welcome everybody to this webinar that's going to report back on the 4th Global Repair Cafe survey. The core content of the presentation will be completed by Beth Quinton and Peter Counter, who are PhD students at University of the Creative Arts. I'm Martin Charter, the Director of the Centre for Sustainable Design, and also I bring sort of experience of being part of the last 3 surveys, and also founding a repair cafe that is now over 10 years old, and we've run over 115 sessions. So we bring some sort of practical experience to this as well. So the survey itself is a collaboration with the Repair Cafe International Foundation and Joanna and Martin. We've worked with, or Peter and Beth and myself have worked with closely on the survey. They're unfortunately they're not able to make it today because of prior commitments, but they asked us to welcome you all on behalf of RSIF. So the format will be a presentation of the key results from the survey. Will be quite comprehensive. So again, if things particularly spark your interest, or you have some questions in relation to your own experience, please add questions to the chat. So maybe next slide, please, Beth. So again, just reinforcing that, questions into the chat as precise as you can. If they're very long questions, I'm the person who's curating them and trying to understand them. If they're very long, I simply will not be able to process that. So please keep them as tight as you can. Please remain muted at all times until the end, when we open up for questions, and we'll do this probably on a raising of a hands basis. The webinar is being recorded and will be made, a link will be made available in due course, with also a summary report. There is an ability to see captions and subtitles, and there is the instructions to get to achieve that. So I haven't used that myself, so I'd have to rely on yourselves to go and highlight, access that through more actions, language, speech. So I think without further ado, unless I've missed anything out, Peter or Beth, we'll crack on, and I will pass over to Beth to start with, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, okay, so I'll just go over the content first. So you can see here, these are just some of the different topics that were included in the survey, and we'll be going through the results of these throughout the webinar. So just to give a little bit of background, and well, I'll give you a little bit of an introduction to myself first. So my name is Beth. I'm one of the researchers, and so my background is environmental science, and I'm a PhD student at the University for the Creative Arts. So I'm researching repair cafes, and specifically clothing repair within repair cafes and the engagement of young people. So just looking at the background a little bit. So the survey was conducted in November/December last year, and managed by myself and by Peter. So we're both researching repair cafes, but we have distinct aspects that we're researching each. So this survey, it follows on from the first 3, so conducted in 2014, 2016 and 2020. And it asks questions on a few topics that weren't covered in the previous ones, and also to provide some continuity from the previous surveys as well. So I'll just pass over to Peter and he can introduce himself and then cover a bit of the methodology as well.
Hi, yes, I'm Peter. I may not look like it, but I'm also a PhD student, although I've been some since retired. It was Martin's University who decided to run PhDs in repair cafes, and since I'm a volunteer at his repair cafe, I thought I'd be interested to do it. My experience is in IT. I've been a very long career in IT, mostly with IBM and then latterly with the UK Health Service. So on to what we did here, and I see Chris has already asked who was invited, and actually that's right here, because the International Foundation invited all of their registered people, 3,834 of them. We also had in the UK, as a result of some prior research, we had another 393 cafes that were not registered with RCIF. A big chunk of those were Repair Cafe Wales, with 130 of those, but there were many others as well. So there was a total of 4,227. We got 946 replies, and that's a 22.4% response rate, which we were quite pleased with. We built the survey using JISC. We did it in 3 languages, and it was open for a month in November and a bit of December. There were 89 questions, although most people didn't answer 89 questions because many of them were dependent on what you answered for the previous question, but we had them in the 12 topics that you've just seen. So then, just to know, it's been 6 months since we did the survey, and you might wonder what on earth we've been doing. Well, quite a lot of the intervening period has been taken up with other stuff we had to do for our PhDs, but we also were doing all the analysis. So the choice questions and the multi-choice questions were quite straightforward. We just counted those and drew some graphs from them. The language questions, which was either a free text answer or a other please specify kind of answer, they were more difficult. We put them into a Word document, and the Word document with just the language answers to the questions was 314 pages. So we had to go through and work out what all that meant and turn it into some data that we could use. I'm now going to talk about the first. Let me just get the right slide up. There we go. I'm going to talk about the first little section, which was about your repair cafe. And we had 30 countries responded, mostly from Germany, France, Netherlands, and United Kingdom, although honourable mentions for Belgium, the US, and then for Canada, Australia, and Denmark. It was worth noting that 87% of the responses were from Europe, and that simply reflects the number of repair cafes that are out there. There are obviously more where the movement first started. We asked what your role was, and 81% said they were the leader, with a few committee members and volunteers, and then a few other titles that you put forward. It's worth remembering for some subsequent slides that 80% were leaders. I just leave that hanging there for some subsequent discussions. How long have you been open? A spread, of course, but worth looking at these groups here. Almost, well, more than a third open only 1 to 4 years, and of course those and the less than a years, none of those were running at all since we did the last survey. Well, when we did the last survey. Quite a few people said, in answer to the question, why don't you want to take part? They said, well, we've been running for less than a year and we haven't got as much data and we haven't got as much experience to contribute, which was a shame because we like to have heard from everybody. But even so, 8% have been running less than a year in our respondents. How was the Repair Cafe founded? This is a similar question to one asked in previous surveys, and we have a sort of similar answer, mostly by an informal group of individuals or just a motivated single individual. Some of them were done as part of a wider initiative, so various sustainability initiatives have started to run their own repair cafes. And sometimes a charity or another public institution has asked to get started with a repair cafe. Smaller numbers of repair cafes were reported that weren't on this chart, being set up by various community projects or religious groups. So it's worth bearing in mind these are only the driving force for the setup of the cafe. There are almost every cafe has a variety of partners, and we did those in a subsequent question. So I'm going to hand back over to Beth now. We're going to take it in turns. We're not quite in turns. We're going to do various of these sections. So Beth has got a few to do now, and then in a while I will have another go with some other questions. So over to you, Beth.
Okay, so this section looks at venues and volunteers.
Gone quiet, Beth. Gone muted.
Sorry,
there we
managed
go.
to mute myself.
Okay.
So as you can see here, repair cafes are generally held at the same venue each month, and only 4% didn't have a set venue that they operate from. So the repair cafes that do have various venues, there was around 95 repair cafes that run more than once a month as well. And we also had a handful of repair cafes who run a bit more ad hoc and have various venues and no fixed schedule. If you're also interested to know if these various venues are local to each other or repair cafes that are traveling around, as that is something we've started to see a little bit more. And if we compare this as well to the previous surveys, where repair cafes run has been pretty similar. There's been an ever so slight decrease since the first survey. But yeah, so we slightly expected more of a change as repair cafes evolve, but they seem to be pretty consistent in this manner. So if we look at how often repair cafes are being held, so it's most common for them to be held once a month. Many said they do 10 a year, and we expect that's 10 once a month, excluding December and August, which is skipped due to the holidays. So it's also common for repair cafes to host 4 to 6 events a year, so around every 2 to 3 months. There's also a small amount of repair cafes that are running a lot more frequently, so some weekly or some running even multiple days a week. So when we calculate this with the number of repair cafes who responded to the survey, so if we use the midpoints, this works out around 13,000 repair cafes a year. And we can then use that as a sample and scale this up to the approximate amount of repair cafes that we know of and that the survey was sent to and are registered. And that works out at around 60,000 repair cafes every year. And then we can then also compare this data to that from the previous surveys. And it is again pretty similar. Again, there's been a slight decrease since the second survey in the number of repair cafes that are hosting once a month. Yeah, so it seems to be pretty consistent in this aspect as well. So if we look at volunteers a little bit more now, so most repair cafes had between 5 to 19 volunteers. And again, if we use the number of responses and average number of volunteers attending, this works out at around 55,000 volunteers across repair cafes. And if we look at the total number of volunteers on the repair cafe list altogether, the average is around 21. So that averages out to around 89,000 volunteers in repair cafes globally. We also looked at the number of repair cafes, the number of volunteers that repair cafes have on their list altogether, alongside how many they have actually attending each repair cafe. So it generally works out at around 62%. So for the proportion of volunteers attending each event, but that does differ depending on the size of the repair cafe. So if we have a look at the demographics of volunteers a little bit, so this is quite interesting. So it's common for repair cafes to have no volunteers under the age of 25. And that was the case for 65% of repair cafes. And only just under a third had 1 to 3 volunteers in this age group as well. And it was also very uncommon for repair cafes to have more than 20 volunteers under 25. If we look at the 25 to 49 age range as well, over a quarter had no volunteers in this category. And it's most common for repair cafes to have around 1 to 3 in this age range. So it was pretty uncommon for repair cafes to have more than 20 volunteers in any one age range. But out of all of them, the 60 to 69 age range was more common to have over 20 volunteers in. And then you had around a third of repair cafes had 1 to 3 volunteers over 70, but there was also a further quarter that had no volunteers in this age range. So then if we continue looking at this, you can see a estimated age profile of active volunteers here. So you can see it's most common to have volunteers be in the 60 to 69 age range. And the under 25s did receive a more concise range of data. So with repair cafes having more similar responses. But if we look at the outliers for this category, there are quite a lot of diverse outliers. It's understood that this is probably from repair cafes operating from or within schools and universities. So they have a really high number of young people in, or some are made up nearly entirely of young people. But again, that is quite uncommon and doesn't generally fit with the general trend of the data. So now focusing on volunteer recruitment, we found it was slightly more common for repair cafes to be looking for volunteers than those that had enough. So electrical skills were highlighted as the most required by repair cafes, and this was followed by computing equipment, repair, mechanical skills, and mobile phone repair as well. And then repair cafes are also looking for quite a variety of skills, so things such as reception and greeting, and clothing repairers as well. So when repair cafes are looking for these volunteers, word of mouth and social media were the most popular choices. And some repair cafes also use partner organisations, networks, and we had 8 repair cafes as well that said they were recruiting directly through schools or youth groups.
Can I just ask, there's a question coming, just a point of clarification. Within the analysis, do volunteers include both the repairers and the front desk admin?
Yes.
Yes, so all volunteers, not just repairers, all volunteers at the repair cafe. Okay, so if we look at the resources, so over 3/4 of repair cafes provide their volunteers with tools, and most also provide spares and consumables. And it was also quite common for social events to be provided, with around half doing this and just under a third as well providing some form of training. So we're going to have a look in a bit more detail at the specifics of that now as well. So as for what tools are being provided, this is commonly kind of bulkier items such as soldering equipment, hand tools, lamps, meters and testing equipment, and sewing machines. But there were quite a variety of items as well. So there are a few less common ones such as 3D printers. Some provide mobile phones, and we had 4 repair cafes as well that provided thermal cameras. So quite a wide variety of different items. And as for spares as well, so it was common for repair cafes to provide kind of fixings, glues, electrical components and solder. And then some also provided things such as lamp parts, batteries, plugs, cleaning products. And then interestingly as well, we had about 7 repair cafes that replied saying they provide salvage spares. So we assume from this that this is them using parts from maybe other unfixable items, but they might also come from other sources as well. Okay, so regarding training, general repair training was the most common type that was provided. But there's also some more specific ones. So there's some that were providing PAT testing training, general safety training, first aid, and there were some subsections in that as well. So some would provide things such as specifically like mental health first aid, and then other things such as like informal training during the repair cafe. So getting different repairers to sit in different with different categories to learn that way. And then for social events as well, so a meal or drinks was the most common option, and also common for repair cafes to provide some kind of seasonal get together, so a Christmas party, a summer barbecue, things like that. And some also opted for organised days out and activities, such as visiting other local groups or things like that. I think someone said they go to a local train event, which will sound interesting. And then 9 repair cafes identified the socialisation aspect of the repair cafe itself to be a social event for volunteers.
Just again, a quick point of clarification. PAT testing.
We'll cover that later, Martin.
Yeah, I think you might.
We're going to come on to that. Portable appliance testing, it stands for.
Yeah. I think just assume not everybody fully understands that.
Okay. So I'm going to do a bit on organisational structure.
Not just yet. I've got to just do goals first.
Have you? You've got more goals.
One more. Sorry, you've got to listen to me talk for another couple of minutes.
I thought it was my go.
Okay, so goals and objectives. So I've only got a couple of slides on this.
You better put the slides back up again then.
Oh, you kicked me off.
Because I stole them.
Right. There we go. Can you see that? Yeah. Right. Okay, so now if we look at the goals and objectives of repair cafes, so as expected, reducing and preventing waste was considered the most important goal. So about 48% responded saying this was extremely important. This was also followed by encouraging people to become more waste conscious as well. So these follow on from the results of the 3rd global survey, and it shows that the top goals of repair cafes have remained the same since then. If we look at the goals that are considered less important, so improving employability skills of volunteers was considered the least important of those goals. And this is kind of what we expected as well, knowing the general demographics of repair cafes. And there's some other interesting goals in there as well, so such as helping visitors to save money, providing a space to share knowledge and skills were also quite highly rated. And so if we look at the other goals that repair cafes consider important, when answering this question, a lot of repair cafes gave answers that were very similar to the goals that were in the previous question. And kind of a lot of them overlapped quite a lot, but we thought that was still quite interesting. So it shows how much of a priority these goals were. So things such as building community and providing a social activity for volunteers and a social space for visitors as well. Now it's your go.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So take that. So there we are. Don't come up yet? No. It'll come up soon. Can you see it yet? Yes.
Yep. Okay.
So the leadership structure, we asked about that. How do you run your repair cafe? About half, just under half, said they have a steering group or a committee of some kind. Although more than a third said they're led informally just by a single person. And obviously that gives some concern for, protection against accident or illness. So if you're running a repair cafe and you're just everything relies on you, you might like to think of what might happen in the future. 17% have a formal board of directors, that they are probably the ones that have some kind of legal status which mandates that. And so for legal status, not all that many, only 19%.
You've muted yourself, Peter.
I've muted myself. Just annoying. That mute button's right where you don't want it, isn't it? 19% have, only 90% have legal status, but that's probably because almost a half are part of a larger organisation, which presumably does have its own legal status. So these will be sustainability organisation or town councils or Rotary clubs. All kinds of places have started repair cafes. So the repair cafe doesn't need its own legal status, and indeed, a third does not fall into either camp. They're not part of larger organisations. They're not got their own legal status. Most people tell us that legal status is a limit on the liability for leaders. So if something bad goes wrong, and you don't have any legal status as a repair cafe, then the leaders are personally accountable for any disaster that happens. So that's why most people say, "Oh, we need some sort of legal status." It also makes it easier to get bank accounts and insurance. So I think we've covered all those. What kind of legal status do you have? This is hugely dependent on which country you're in. So CICs and CIOs, these are UK constructions. Foundations and associations and various non-profit things are various different parts of Europe have different rules on these things. Okay, if you don't have legal status, 345 of you, do you plan to get it? No. Most people, I think, comfortable being large part of the larger organization. Only a few said yes, and if you said yes, then we asked what kind of legal status, and again we got the spread of different things appropriate for different countries. Visitors, I think this is back to Beth. And you're muted again.
No.
The mute button's right by the share button.
There we go. It didn't want to unmute me. I pressed it like 4 times, which is not doing anything. Right, so visitors. So if we're looking at who's bringing things into repair cafes, so it was most common to have around 10 to 19 visitors per event. So using an average of 28 that works out with the higher sometimes as well, and works out the median values. This works out at approximately 27,000 visitors across the repair cafes who responded. And then when we use this as the responses as a sample for the repair cafes we have worldwide, this works out at an estimated 1.5 million visitors worldwide per year to repair cafes. So quite a lot. That's a lot of visitors. So now we want to know what where are we at? There we go. Sorry, we wanted to know if repair cafes had visitors as well, but were coming just for the social interaction aspect, as opposed to bringing things in to be repaired. So the responses showed that over half of repair cafes had visitors who would occasionally come for socialisation. An additional quarter had they didn't have any restrictions against people coming for just the social interaction, but either just didn't have the demand, or just aren't aware of that. So, in relation to what visitors are bringing with them as well, again, 10 to 19, most common number of products processed per repair cafe, which kind of lines up with the amount of visitors as well. So usually one item per person. And that's an average of 27 products per event. So again, when we scale this up, this is an estimated 1.6 million items being bought to repair cafes per year across the world. So that's a lot of things that we're addressing. So having a little look at the financial side now, so donations and charges. So over half of repair cafes don't talk about donations with visitors at all. And for those that do, they're most likely to ask for a donation as the visitor is leaving after the item has been seen by repairers. So it's much less common for repair cafes to have a suggested donation amount, and there's only 5% that really opt for this method. So this could be for various reasons, such as maybe wanting to maintain financial accessibility, allowing people to kind of donate what they feel. So, and if we look at what repair cafes are using donations for, so most use them to cover expenses and pay for tools, and just under a third as well use donations for hiring venues. So it's expected that some repair cafes may have agreements with venues or with partner organisations that allow them to access certain venues either for free or for reduced rates as well. And we had some repair cafes as well that choose to donate money to other organisations, other charities, or their partner organisation. So this would kind of suggest that some repair cafes are receiving more donations than is needed for the essential running of the event, and also a desire to extend that generosity into the community as well, and have a greater positive impact as well. There were also a small number of repair cafes who give the donations directly to volunteers, which we thought was an interesting approach. So if we look at what people do when an item requires a spare part, so what are the repair cafe policies? So over half of repair cafes have a few simple items that they don't charge for. So these are things such as batteries and screws. And other policies include leaving it up to the repairer. And then we had around a fifth of repair cafes as well that opt to charge visitors for all spares and consumables. So when spare parts are required, around 2/3 of repair cafes tell the owner what it is that they need, and then ask them to buy the item and then come back to a later event. So this would reduce the kind of admin aspect on repairers, and it's expected this is usually the most common because it's reducing the time constraints, because a lot of repair cafes are usually running for a few hours. And then we had around a quarter say that you leave it up to the repairer to decide on how to get spare parts. So it could be that some repairers might have bits lying around at home they're happy to use, or good connections with places to buy spare parts. And other times it might be that they need the visitor to buy it and then come back. Okay, so a large portion of repair cafes, nearly all repair cafes, never charge a fee for repairs. So of those that do charge a fee, this is generally for certain items. So there's very few that charge for all repairs. Of those that do charge a fee, parts were the most common to charge for. However, it is expected with this question. So we use the phrase charge a fee, and we expect that either through translation or just how people have interpreted that. So it seems that some people, when responding, interpreted charge a fee the same as kind of donations, or more general monetary like charge, as opposed to charging a specific fee for labour or like an overall charge for repairing. So regarding charging for specific repairs, lengthy repairs were charged for by some repair cafes. Other included doing like specialist testing, tool sharpening, and sewing machines as well. So it's expected that some repair cafes charge for these because they're more complicated, they take longer. And unclean items were also highlighted by some repair cafes as something they charge for. So of the small number of repair cafes that do charge for all repairs, it was most common for them to charge just a flat fee across everything, so one price for everything. For those charging a fee for unclean items, it could be seen as it's less of a general charge, more of a fee for the inconvenience to the repairer, to the venue. And then there was also 2 repair cafes that stated their charging policy included a voluntary donation. But again, we think this might be to do with the phrasing, because it's unclear really if it can be considered a charge if it's voluntary. So it's not really enforceable as a policy. Okay, I'm going to pass back over to Peter.
Thank you so much. I've now got quite a few things in a row to do. I think we're doing okay for time, so I'm sorry we're going quickly through this, but as Martin says, do stop your questions and put them in the chat, and we hope to get through them. This is about sort of policies for what do you accept and what don't you accept. As expected, therefore, most repair cafes accept most household items. There's no complete alignment, though, on you would expect it's kind of, almost all repair cafes to accept a reasonable selection of some of these things, but the fact that quite a few of them don't, I think, points to some specialist repair cafes that only do, for example, bicycles or clothing or something like that, and various local issues that say, well, we can't do this or that here, or we don't have the right repairers. It's worth looking at the limitations of surveys just at this one. So if you look at this one at the end, mobile phones, 37% of people repair cafes accept mobile phones. Okay, so that means 63% don't accept mobile phones, you would expect. However, when we asked what items do you not accept, mobile phones came in at 41% instead of 63%. So there may be 20% of people who weren't quite sure, or maybe it's just the limitations of what people can remember when they're running through a survey. But we'd quite like to know for some of these things why they were excluded. Future research, I think, will focus, that I'm certainly doing, will focus on some of these, but we think it's to do with safety for some items, maybe skill shortage, space for some of the bigger items, and then particularly protection for local businesses where we don't want to compete with them. Further off this list, which were not included on the graph, were medical equipment, weapons, and clocks, and zips. So it's an interesting selection of things, other things that people excluded. Another key question for some repair cafes is, do they allow modifications or not? Some people say, oh, well, no, it's not a repair. If it's a modification, that's something else. And we're a repair cafe. And so quite a large number of people, these are the no's in this amber color here. No, we don't allow modifications to kind of anything. In the gray area here, it's, well, not normally, but the repairer can agree. And then, yes, fine, if it can be done. Yep. Sorry, was there a question there? No. So the biggest item of modification is clothing. We think that's likely because it's a bit easier, or it's either a bit easier to do than change a coffee grinder, or it's a blurred line between what is a repair and what is a modification when you're fixing something. So what else do you do? Yeah, you do repairs. Yep, 68%. No, we just do repairs. But do you do other stuff? And people take unrepairable items for recycling. They do repair training for the public, reuse workshops, tools, libraries, community events, and so on. And even other things that didn't make it onto the graph, with providing advice, doing wildlife activities, upcycling, and so on. So I think most repair cafes stick to their repairs, but about a third go off and do other sustainable activities. If you offered training to the public, this was 73 people here, what training do you offer? And the answer was, well, electrical and general mostly, sewing things. Quarter went out, of the people that did this went out to schools, bikes and soldering. So again, repair training for the public, interesting sideline for repair cafes. Now on to the repair process and the data collection that results from it. So starting at the beginning, how do you notify a repair cafe that you've got something that needs to be repaired? Just over half the people said, no, you just bring it in. We don't want prior notice. Some people said they can enter the details into a website. Some people said, no, we don't want to know unless it's very unusual. But 12%, so this is 100 and something, said you are required to book. This is our process. You're required to book it in before you come into the repair cafe. And other people said, usually the larger ones, you can print a form if you want. So the one interesting sideline on this is the people that require to book. So the other 43%, so it's either required or allow you to book. Does this allow you to get a better success rate than the people that don't do this? Because they say, well, we have the right repairers and the right tools, but do they? Does it make a difference? And that's something, again, to be analysing this data for further research later on to see whether that's actually borne out in the figures. Very large repair cafes, for reasons that I don't quite understand, so these are people with 40 volunteers or more, are more likely to have a website available than others. I mean, a lot more than people in their 30 to 40. It was like triple the number of those. The percentage had a website you could book stuff in on. Safety checks. So we talked about pat testing, and this is that's an example of safety checks. Do you do electrical safety checks for items which are brought in for repair? And the answer was a third don't. I mean, roughly a quarter, yes, we do it afterwards, and almost a half said we run checks before and after. And so a check, an electrical safety check, is typically a visual check to see there aren't any wires hanging out, and there's no frayed wires or anything like that, and some earthing tests which are done on a specialist machine. And checks before the repair are to safeguard the repairers, checks after the repair are safeguard the owners. But 31% do not require those safety checks at all. Of course, it varies by country whether this is a sort of mandatory kind of thing in your country or not.
Perhaps, Peter, bear in mind that first question, you might very, very briefly just explain what PAT testing is, just in case
yes,
there
just
are
coming
people.
To that.
Yeah, okay.
Just coming to that. Yeah. This is this slide. Yeah, thanks, Martin. So which electrical safety tests do you do? And again, this is for the people that do the tests. So safety tests, different standards in different countries. The PAT testing is the UK version. So this is portable appliance testing, usually called PAT testing, which of course is just portable appliance testing. But that's what people call it. And it's not mandatory. It is mandatory for businesses if you have electrical items in a business like screens and so on. And it's also mandatory if you are renting property out. It's not mandatory for voluntary things like a repair cafe, but it's still a jolly good thing to do to protect your visitors and your volunteers. There's a similar standard in Germany called VDE, and in Australia the same thing is called test and tag. So one thing that worried me about this slide is that, first of all, 7% of people put RCD, this is residual current detection, which is the little things you put in the plug when you supply to dangerous places. So in most repair cafes put RCDs on their supplies that they give to people for running items to see whether they're working or not. But it's not a safety test. It's a good thing to do, having electrical isolation for your supply, for your repairers, but it's not a safety test. 5% said they leave it to their repairers. So typically the comments were, we don't do this, we leave it to our repairers. And 12% didn't know. So a quarter, 12%, 5% and 7% don't really know about electrical safety testing in their repair cafe. And I mean, this is not a place for passing judgment, but along with the 1/3 who don't do it, probably those leaders, in my opinion, should have a bit of a look more at this, because it's an important thing for your safety. Next question: do you use a paper system or an electronic system for recording repair details? Well, 44% have no electronic record. So that's this 38% here record the details on paper, or the 6% that don't record any details at all. And so there's no electronic record of this, but 58% do, either indirectly, they get it on paper and they transcribe it later, or they put the details directly into an electronic system. There's differing views across the board about whether it's effective to have people using an electronic system while the repair cafe is running. But at the moment, there's only 11% do. If you do, this was 104 people said, yes, we use an electronic system. Do you get your repairers to enter the data straight in? And 63% said, no, we don't do that. 13% said, yes, we do. And about a quarter said, well, it's up to them if they do, but we'll key it in later if they don't. So for the other people, not the people that do, but the people that don't, no electronic system of any kind, the paper people and the no details kept people, why don't you use an electronic system? And there are a variety of reasons offered for why they don't have any. Most popular, that paper systems are easy to use, and we're too busy to do it, and we don't see the point. For the people that use an electronic system, which one do you use? A lot of people use only a spreadsheet. There's various people. We asked the specific question about Repair Monitor and Fixometer. which are the two big ones that aggregate. Astonishingly, I thought 9%, so this is 50 repair cafes, 49, use a custom-built system, either based on forms or some with these full-scale management systems written in high-level programming languages with SQL databases, or else using web application building environments. Some people even have gone for association management software. This is to manage their visitors and volunteers, or they use a ticketing system to give tickets out, or they do a workflow management system using Troy. So a huge number of people are doing their own thing, and asked what more detail can we have about that. Over 50% said it's unique to our repair cafe, and another 10% said, well, it's written for our repair cafe, but now some other people are using it. So if you look at those numbers, so the 43 and the 8, that aligns with the 49 current custom ones that we saw from the previous question. Again, you project that up as we did for the other data. That means there's something like 220 custom written systems for running a repair cafe out there, which kind of points to a hole in the market, except it's not a market, so nobody's got any money to pay for one, although people must have paid or done it in their spare time, I expect. So do you share your repair data? 69% said no. 157 we know send their data from the previous question. We know send their data to Repair Monitor or to Fixometer. And of these, an analysis that isn't on here, but of all the others, we found that 60 do upload their data for aggregation to some system or another. So the total number of repair cafes who aggregate their data, this is to send it for combining so that you can look at the whole piece about how many repairs are done. That's the 157 here and the 60. 23% of repair cafes say we publish our data. However, previous question, do you remember question 34 that Beth went through? 1.6 million items a year are going through. That's our current run rate. And the ORA, who are the people that pull together, this is the Open Repair Alliance, whose members include Restart and the foundation, the Repair Cafe Foundation. They publish 305 in their latest thing, 305,000 electricals and 135,000 what we call unpowered repairs. But that 44,000, I thought, well, that's about 23% of the 1.6 million. But that's over, well, I was reminded yesterday, it isn't quite 15 years. It's probably nearer 10 years since we've been recording these. But it's nowhere near the current run rate of people that say we are publishing our data. And I don't know why that is. That's, again, another subject for research. I can't tell you why that discrepancy exists, but the numbers actually appearing don't quite match what people are saying they do. Okay, you don't share your data for conservation. Why is that? And then there's a number of, well, I was going to say excuses, but that rather gives away my personal feeling on this. The point is, this is one of the big focuses for my research, which is why I'm particularly interested in it. There are the overall benefits of doing this. It's the problem between the effort to capture this data has to be done by the Repair Cafe, but the benefit is to these people. It's to legislators and eco-campaigners. It's for media people who want to write stories. It's for the, at the moment, relatively small number of manufacturers who want to track their items after they've gone out of warranty and want to know what happens to them. So there are, all these people are trying to make progress to bring the circular economy to happen, and they need data. They need data from this sector, the Repair Cafe sector, because they can't get it any other place. And so one of the things I'm trying to do later in the research is to see if we can make it easy enough for the repair cafes to do while being able to provide the benefit to the other people. And then here were a few other interesting miscellaneous items where repair cafes have different practice. So do you triage your items before allocation? Triage means you assessed and checked the item before you allocate it to a repairer. 59% yes, 41% no. Do you have timed repair slots? Again, I don't know how they keep to that, but that's an interesting question, that a quarter of repair cafes have timed repair slots. Some people, a quarter, are struggling with more, I think struggling with more than one room, where that limits the admin time and the interaction between repairers. Do you expect the owner to stay during the repair? And it wasn't quite as clear a question as I would have liked with hindsight, because I know some people say, yes, you better stay, but you can go and have coffee in the meantime. And which I saw actually yesterday in an advertisement. Come and have coffee while we repair your item. So most people, I think, regard being there with the owner during the repair as being something that's important to extending skills and capability. But some people don't do it at all, and I suggest a chunk of these don't actually make the visitor stay at the time with the repairer. And then here was one that I was personally surprised about, which is only 40% have a little exit survey, hand you a piece of paper on the way out saying, what do you think? Were you satisfied? 60% don't do that. Certainly in our repair cafe, we find that a very helpful thing to do. Okay, I've got two more of these to do. Problems in running the repair cafe. Oops, go back. These are similar set of problems that we've seen throughout the surveys. Finding enough volunteers is the biggest one by far. Problems you have faced. The grey is, yes, it was a problem, but we fixed it. And the amber here is not a problem. So although there are problems out here, my takeaway from this is actually most repair cafes are working pretty well most of the time. It's not an environment where people are in trouble or struggling. Actually, the things work pretty well, and even the first one is kind of contingent on the second one. You've got too many items brought in, so you haven't got enough volunteers. So those were the specific things we asked about, and then we said, what about any other problems? And people still talked about, yeah, I know I've just ticked the other boxes, but let me tell you about my venue issues. Let me tell you about my volunteer commitment issues. And again, quite a lot of people saying we haven't got anywhere to store all our stuff. And then a long tail of particularly difficult other issues. And then that was problems you've now resolved. This one's problems you're still having. And people again said, despite the boxes we ticked, I still like to tell you about the venue that I'm having problems with and the volunteers that I'm having problems with. So these are the issues that repair cafes are running with day to day. One interesting item here is that a few repair cafes reported that the visitors buy broken items on eBay, get them repaired at the repair cafe, and then sell them back as a business. And there seems to be two approaches to this. One is to say, this is disgraceful. This is a complete abuse of the kind-hearted people that volunteer to repair it. And other repair cafes take the opposite view that says, no, this is what we're all about. We're saving stuff from landfill. This is marvelous. I wish they'd do it more. And so you have those two opposing views for that. It'd be interesting to know what everybody thinks of that. Perhaps you'd like to put that in the chat as well if you want to feedback on that one. Here was an interesting piece that we thought we might get some interesting stuff back from when we did. If you were setting up a new repair or helping set one up, helping a new repair cafe, what would your main pieces of advice be? Key things is obviously have enough volunteers, but particularly get enough before you launch. These ones are about visiting other repair cafes. Most people saying many, but at least one. And then the things you would expect, get to a variety of skills, do your publicity. And then this one says get support from Repair Cafe International Foundation, but there is a list which I'll show you in a moment where support from all the other places are put as well. So let me just go down here. Interesting. A lot of people said just get on with it. That's my advice. Just go and do it. Get on with it. Stop faffing about, which was an interesting piece of advice. I don't expect you to read this, but just for your perusal later, perhaps. This is all the advice that we got. So these are the various headings that I put them into: documentation, ethos, leadership, organization, partnering, process, and so on. And then underneath each thing, so under documentation, these things are in the order in which people commonly cited them. Okay, so the most important partnering thing was collaboration with local organizations. The most important process thing was organize your tools and have a triage system. There's various conflicting things here. This one under organization says, get legal status, right? And this one here says, don't get legal status, which is interesting set of advice that people give. Don't get legal status is around keeping your independence and so on. But I leave you there. Oh, this is the other support from RSIF, from Reparatur Initiativen, from Germany, Repair Cafe Denmark, Restart, Wales, New Zealand, and so on. So go and get from your national or local network some support. So then this one's problem repairing items. The biggest one is we can't open it, which suggests, I think, that, I mean, almost everything is openable in the end, except if it's completely glued up. So it's just generally a question of spending enough time, but people for their second one said, no, well, we don't have enough time. So I think those two are definitely related. Spare parts problem, either can't get them or too expensive. Sometimes it's just too old and too damaged. Service documentation's big issue. Complicated electronics. If you can't get the circuit diagram, you're pretty well stuck. Significant other problems. Well, it's the obsolescence thing. We didn't make it to be repaired. It was, too cheap to bother with. Lack of maintenance, an interesting one. You don't maintain your item and then you bring it into a repair cafe. Well, you should have maintained it and followed the instructions, which people would like to say. Frequently cited as problem items: coffee machines, vacuum cleaners, phones, clocks, circuit boards, TVs, and zips, which is a similar list to some of the things people said they don't accept for repair. Right, another contentious one is the liability insurance. 68%, 2/3, more than 2/3 have liability insurance, either on their own bat or under the auspices of some other organization that they work with. 12% of people said they weren't sure, which is where the 81% of leaders comes in. So I did look up for these 109 people that said they weren't sure. 81 of those were leaders, and they answered that they weren't sure whether they had insurance or not. So I leave that to you to say, is that the sort of thing that if you were a leader, you would want to make sure about, that you knew what was going on. Insurance is quite complicated, actually, because there's all kinds of different insurance, and we asked you about those ones, exactly what was insured. Some people said they still weren't sure about the details, which is understandable because this is a complicated area. But I think in any piece of advice would say, as a leader, that's something you should have absolutely at your fingertips. However, in mitigation of the people who don't have insurance, there isn't generally a problem. And this is one. If you've had to make an insurance claim, please let us know. Only 2% of people ever said. In fact, there were these 17 items from 15 repair cafes, and I put them all down here for you to read at your leisure. There was a few injuries to volunteers. there was some damage and theft, there was venue damage, there was one banking scam, and one injury to a visitor who cut themselves on a blade while they were testing their repaired item. There were no problems caused by unsafely repaired items, which gives you some comfort if you don't have insurance, because that's the big insurance issue, that you'll be liable for somebody's house burning down if you haven't repaired it properly. But mercifully, so far, there's the future, but nobody's actually had a problem like that. And finally, on my side, relationships with other organizations. So 90% said they were affiliated with or registered with Repair Café International, but that's not surprising because 92% of the invitations went to the people that were registered with them. So if those two numbers hadn't aligned up, we'd be in trouble. Apart from that, 45% said we have none, but the other 55% say we have a variety of sustainability organizations and partners and networks. So on the networks, we asked who were they, and there was a list of networks. Anstiftung is a German one, Repair Together is a Belgian one. There was Denmark. Restart is fairly international now. Haute de France is obviously in France. Repair Café Wales, one in the US, and Martin's Greater Surrey one also figures. Very, very good. Do any of those affiliated organizations give you essential stuff that you couldn't do without? And a third of repair cafes, of people that said yes to that, said they help us with the venue, they help us with insurance, they help us with marketing and with funding. And I think probably after that, these ones at the front here were the reasons that they're essential. And then there was this long tail of other things that those helpful people do for us. Do you go and talk to your local commercial repair shops? Because if you don't, you probably should do, because you don't want to take away their business. And the ideal model is where they refer easy things to you and you refer difficult things to them. So do you have a relationship? And only 13% said yes, with sewing on phones and electricals and stuff, mostly these clothing ones. Lots of places share volunteers. So a huge number, 58%, and the 14% that comes to don't quite add up because there's some with both, but 64% of repair cafes they have volunteers working with other community repair organizations. And over to Beth for last two sections.
Yeah, not too much left now. Okay, right, so I'm going to just be talking through a little bit about engaging young people with repair cafes. So this is where my overall research focuses. So we had 86% of repair cafes said that they wanted to engage young people in some way, either now or in the future, and that's either as volunteers or visitors. So you can see that how that's split up here on this graph. So if we split that up, we can see about half of repair cafes want to encourage more young volunteers in the future. And similarly, just under half as well are trying to engage more young people as volunteers right now. And one of the other questions we asked was, would you like more support and suggestions to engage more young people? And 64% of you said, yes, we would like some help. So hopefully once my research is a bit further along, I can provide some help would be nice. So how is your repair cafe trying to engage more young people? So the most common method for repair cafes was encouraging volunteers and visitors to bring young people with them. It's expected this was a common method. It puts a little bit of less constraints on the repair cafe in terms of organisation and supervision as well, so they can be supervised by the people that brought them in. So running repair cafes with schools was also another popular method for engaging young people, as well as hosting schools and youth groups as well at the repair cafe. So we're now looking at some of the other ideas that repair cafes had for engaging young people. So there was quite a wide variety of suggestions. So the most popular suggestion is directly engaging with schools and with other forms of formal education as well, so colleges and like training courses and things like that. Other ideas included things such as adjusting the social media, so creating apprentice roles, hosting specific family themed events, and having take apart tables or Tinkerbell tables as well. I think some repair cafes called them. So where young people, they can have a go with repair, they can try taking things apart or try sewing something, and there's no consequence of damaging something further. So, they get that freedom to have a bit of go at repairing. Um, so now looking at some of the barriers. So why is it so hard to get young people involved? So this is looking at engaging young people as volunteers, and we'll move on to looking at engaging young people as visitors in a moment. So it was always expected that volunteer time and availability would be an issue and would be a barrier. As it can add extra, it can add extra work. So having to reach out to youth groups or to schools, ensuring like appropriate safety measures as well, and then actually having to provide that guidance and that support during the event too. And for some repairers, they might not want to act as a mentor for young people or have an apprentice, or they just want to get on with things and repair. That's what their focus is, and that's completely fine. So and then marketing and retaining young people was also seen as a barrier for some. So it'd be interesting to know as well with this if the marketing issues are related to kind of how the Repair Cafe is marketing, so the types of social media that's being used, or if it's the content of the marketing and how the Repair Cafe is presenting within that marketing, or if it's just something that is being presented as just something that's not as appealing for some young people. And then we also have 15% who said they'd experienced no barriers. So on this graph, you can see as well that there was 12% that said safeguarding was a barrier. So, that was quite low for what was expected. So, and it's expected that this would be much, much higher. So now these graphs here are looking at safeguarding, and this is a country split. So you can see that most countries had quite a high percentage of their repair cafes stating they were trying to engage young people as volunteers, either now or in the future. And if we then look at the repair cafes from each country that considered safeguarding a barrier, this was really, really low. So, for example, 73% of German repair cafes were trying to engage more young people, but only 5% saw safeguarding as a barrier. And then in comparison, the UK, you had 81% were trying to engage more young people, 31% of those repair cafes saw safeguarding as a barrier. So that a third of UK repair cafes were seeing it as a barrier. So this could be the result of different policies. So, for example, DBS checks in the UK. So they were the result of like events, and that's changed policy. So it's unsure if this is the result of kind of safeguarding being less of a priority in some areas, or there being less focus on it in policy. Yeah.
There's a question, fundamental question on what is safeguarding.
So safeguarding generally is the kind of policies and processes that are put in place to protect young people. So whether that's emotionally, physically, it's just policies put there to make sure young people are safe. So you have that in schools, in other groups as well. So ensuring that they're surrounded by adults that have been checked, and there's policies in place to know how to report something if a young person expresses something that's a concern. So it's unsure if these results are because it's less of a priority in some areas, so it's less in policy, or if some repair cafes just have this completely sorted out, they have their policies in place, so it's not a barrier because they have it sorted. So I'm looking into this a little bit further and researching kind of different approaches to policy in different countries. So if you do have any experience with it, or you have any thoughts on it, I'd love to know. So you can put those in the chat, or contact afterwards. So And again, we're going to look at the same thing, but for engaging young people as visitors. So it was more common for Repair Cafe to not have any barriers for engaging young people as visitors than as volunteers. And safeguarding was also less of a concern as well. Expectedly, as visitors, young people, it's less of a time commitment, it's less tasks, and also they're probably less involved with the practical aspect as well. So again, we have the same graphs as before, but for visitors. So you can see that repair cafes were more likely to be trying to engage young people as volunteers than as visitors. So, and if we take a look at the safeguarding graph, again, that's quite low as well. Yeah, expected less of a concern. They're more likely to have an adult with them if they're coming as a visitor, and yeah, less involved in the practical aspect as well. So, maybe around equipment and things like that. So, okay, and then this is our last main section. So we're going to look at community and outreach. So word of mouth was the most common way that repair cafes reach out to their community. This is pretty much exactly what we expected, really. They're community-based events. So people telling each other, telling their neighbours and their friends, sharing positive experiences is what is bringing people in. Newspapers, newsletters were also used a lot. And out of all the social media platforms, Facebook was the most common choice. Some other social media platforms such as TikTok, Twitter, or X now, they weren't really used as often by repair cafes. And then this is the final bit from me. So over half of repair cafes don't monitor how effective their outreach is. And so those that did generally would use feedback forms. It's expected that this is the most common because it can be done there then and there. So you can give the visitor the feedback form when they're leaving. So and then we also had about 4% of visitors which asked 4% of repair cafes which asked visitors verbally for feedback, which I thought was also quite a good idea for people to be able to connect with visitors as well. Okay, send that over to be.
Okay. Do you want to just click onto the next slide, Beth?
Yeah, might as well.
Since it's there.
Oh.
Or has it gone?
No, it's gone. It's on yours.
Gone. There you go then. So this is the very last slide. We asked you right at the end whether you'd be willing to help with wider research by providing either some of your repaired data in any form or some of your documents or any other things that be willing to be interviewed and so on. An astonishing 662, I think it was, of you said yes. So that is a wonderfully helpful response, and I will be in touch soon to ask you to do some of those things.